Part 1. First contact and the proposition. The morning started like any other Tuesday. People rushed to work, children walked to school, and traffic jams filled the streets of every major city on Earth. Then the sky changed. First, it was just a shadow, a dark spot that appeared over New York City, growing larger by the minute. Within an hour, similar shadows appeared over London, Tokyo, Mumbai, and 50 other cities around the world. The shadows were not clouds, they were ships. The ships looked like they were made of crystal and light. They were beautiful in a way that made people stop walking and stare up at the sky. The ships were huge, each one the size of a football stadium. Floating silently above the cities, no sound came from them, no movement. They just waited. News channels went crazy. Every reporter was talking fast, trying to explain what no one could understand. The military scrambled jets, but the pilots reported that their instruments went wild when they got close to the ships. The ships seemed to exist and not exist at the same time. Then, at exactly 12 p.m., in every time zone, every screen on Earth turned white. Televisions, computer monitors, phone screens, digital billboards, everything with a display showed the same thing, pure white light. Then a face appeared. She was the most beautiful woman anyone had ever seen. Her skin glowed with a soft silver light. Her eyes were like liquid mercury, shifting and flowing. Her hair moved as if she was underwater, even though there was no water around her. When she spoke, her voice came from every speaker on the planet. At the same time, "People of Earth," she said, and somehow everyone understood her, no matter what language they spoke. "We are the Zephyrians. We have traveled across the stars to meet you." The woman smiled, and it was a smile that made people feel calm and safe, like a mother's smile. "My name is Velana. I am the matriarch of our people. For 3,000 years, our civilization has grown and prospered under the guidance of our females. We have watched your world for many centuries. We have seen your struggles, your wars, your suffering. Your planet is dying, and your people are fighting each other instead of working together." Dr. Marcus Chen sat in his office at Columbia University, watching the broadcast like everyone else. He was an anthropologist who studied how different cultures lived and worked together. His hand shook as he took notes. This was the most important moment in human history, and he wanted to remember every word. "We have come to offer you a gift," Velana continued. "Our society has found the secret to peace, prosperity, and happiness. We have no wars. We have no poverty. We have no disease. Our people live for hundreds of years in perfect harmony." She paused, and the camera seemed to move closer to her face. "We can give this to you. We can fix your broken world. We can heal your sick. We can stop your wars. We can clean your oceans and your air. All we ask in return is that you trust us to guide you, as our females have guided our people for thousands of years." The screen showed images of the Zephyrian homeworld, cities that looked like they were made of light and music, gardens that stretched to the horizon, people who looked happy and peaceful, moving through their daily lives with grace and purpose. "Your males have been forced to carry the burden of leadership for too long," Velana said. "They have grown tired and angry from the stress. In our society, females handle the difficult decisions, while males are free to pursue their true nature, creativity, strength, and joy. This is the natural order that brings peace to all." Dr. Chen frowned. Something about the images bothered him, but he couldn't figure out what it was. The Zephyrian males in the pictures looked happy, but there was something strange about their expressions. They looked almost ... empty. "We will demonstrate our good intentions," Velana announced. The screens changed to show scenes from around Earth. In the polluted Ganges River in India, the water suddenly became crystal clear. Fish that had been dead for decades appeared, swimming in clean water. In hospitals around the world, patients with terminal cancer sat up in their beds, completely healed. In the deserts of Africa, green grass began to grow from sand. The proof was impossible to deny. In just a few minutes, the Zephyrians had done things that would take humans decades to achieve. If they could achieve them at all, "We will give you 1 week to decide," Velana said. Speak with your leaders. Discuss among yourselves. But know this time is running out for your species. Your planet cannot survive much longer without help. We offer salvation, but only if you choose to accept it. The screens went black. The world exploded into chaos. Government leaders held emergency meetings. Religious figures debated whether this was divine intervention or demonic trickery. Scientists argued about whether the demonstrations were real or elaborate tricks. Dr. Chen was one of the first people chosen to meet with the Zephyrians face to face. Along with representatives from every major country, he was invited aboard one of the crystal ships floating over New York. The inside of the ship was even more beautiful than the outside. The walls seemed to be made of flowing water that had been frozen into solid form. Lights moved through the walls like fish swimming through clear ice. The air smelled like flowers and rain. Velana greeted them personally. Up close, she was even more impressive. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, and moved with the grace of a dancer. Her silver dress seemed to be made of liquid metal that flowed around her body. "Welcome," she said, and her voice was warm and musical. "Please, ask me anything you wish to know." The questions came fast. How many Zephyrians were there? Where exactly was their homeworld? How did their technology work? How could they be sure this wasn't some kind of invasion? Velana answered patiently. There were approximately 2 million Zephyrians in the fleet. Their homeworld was in a star system, about 50 light years away. Their technology was based on something they called harmony science, the idea that all matter and energy could be controlled through understanding natural patterns. As for invasion, she said with a laugh that sounded like silver bells, what would we gain by conquering a dying world? We have everything we need. We offer this help because it brings us joy to see other species find peace. Dr. Chen raised his hand. Can we see some of your mails? I'm curious about your social structure. Something flickered across Valina's face so fast that Dr. Chen almost missed it. For just a moment, she looked. Worried, of course, she said. Though you must understand our males prefer quiet activities. They may seem shy to you. She led them through corridors that seemed to change shape as they walked. Finally, they entered a large room filled with gardens and fountains. Zephyrian males worked among the plants, tending to flowers and vegetables. Dr. Chen watched them carefully. They were handsome, with the same glowing skin as the females, but smaller and more delicate. They moved smoothly like dancers, but something was wrong. Their eyes were unfocused. When Dr. Chen tried to make eye contact with one of them, the male looked right through him as if he wasn't there. They seem very peaceful, Dr. Chen said carefully. Yes, Velana agreed. They have transcended the need for struggle. They found perfect contentment in their roles. Dr. Chen made notes, but his hand was shaking again. Hey. The male Zephyrians didn't look content. They looked like sleepwalkers. The week passed quickly. Protests filled the streets of some cities, while other cities held celebrations welcoming their alien visitors. Zephyrians continued to perform small miracles, fixing broken infrastructure, healing the sick, cleaning polluted areas. Opinion polls showed that 60% of humans favored accepting the Zephyrian offer. The remaining 40% were split between those who wanted more time to decide and those who wanted the aliens to leave. Immediately, Dr. Chen spent the week writing reports and attending meetings. But he couldn't stop thinking about the empty-eyed Zephyrian males. He tried to research their society, but the information the Zephyrians provided was strangely vague about their history. They talked about their current success, but said very little about how their society had developed over time. On the final day, the world voted. The decision was made through a combination of national referendums and United Nations Assembly votes. The result was announced at sunset, broadcast simultaneously to every nation on Earth. Humanity chose to accept the Zephyrian offer. Celebrations erupted in major cities. Fireworks lit up the sky. People danced in the streets, believing they had just secured a bright future for their children and grandchildren. But Dr. Chen didn't celebrate. That night, as he walked home through the excited crowds in New York, he looked up at the crystal ships floating overhead. Through his binoculars, he could see movement on one of the ships, Zephyrian males working on the outer hull. They moved, like robots, like machines. Like people whose minds had been erased and replaced with simple programming, Dr. Chen lowered his binoculars and felt a chill run down his spine. Humanity had just voted to trust their future to beings whose own males looked like empty shells. What had they done? Part 2. The Golden Cage 5. Years had passed since the Zephyrians arrived on Earth. The world looked completely different now. Jake Morrison stood on the balcony of his apartment in Sanctuary 7, looking out at the gleaming city below. Where once there had been smog and traffic, now crystal towers reached toward the sky. Flying vehicles moved silently through the air, following perfect patterns that never caused accidents. The trees were greener than any trees Jake remembered. From his childhood, the air was so clean it made his lungs feel like they were singing. Jake was 32 years old and had once been a mechanical engineer. He used to work 12-hour days in a dirty factory, fixing broken machines and breathing oil fumes. He used to worry about paying rent, about his health insurance, about whether he would ever be able to afford a vacation now. He didn't worry about anything. His apartment was 3 times larger than his old place, with walls that could become windows at the touch of a button. His bed adjusted automatically to give him perfect sleep. His shower knew exactly what temperature he liked. His kitchen prepared meals that tasted better than anything he had ever eaten, perfectly balanced for his nutritional needs. Every morning, Jake woke up refreshed. He exercised in the Sanctuary's fitness center, where holographic trainers helped him stay in the best shape of his life. After exercise, he worked on projects that interested him, designing new machines, creating art, learning languages. The Zephyrians had given him access to knowledge that would have taken him decades to acquire on his own. In the afternoons, he socialized with other men in the sanctuary. They played sports, discussed philosophy, and shared their creative works. The evening entertainment was always perfect: concerts by the best musicians, plays by the finest actors, games that challenged their minds in exactly the right way. Jake had never been happier in his life. Why did he feel like something was wrong? The feeling had started about 6 months ago. Small things at first. His friend Tom, who used to be a newspaper reporter, had stopped asking questions about the outside world. Used to be curious about everything: politics, economics, what was happening in other countries. Now when Jake brought up these topics, Tom would smile and say, "Why worry about things we can't control? The matriarchs handle all that for us." Other friends had changed too. Mike, who used to love debating about sports, now agreed with everything everyone said. Carlos, who used to complain about missing his old job as a teacher, now spoke only about how grateful he was for his liberation from stress. Jake had started paying attention to the patterns. Men who asked too many questions about life outside the sanctuaries would disappear for a few days. When they came back, they would say they had received wellness treatments to help them with anxiety or depression. But they always came back, different, calmer, more agreeable, less curious. The sanctuaries housed about 10,000 men each, and there were hundreds of them around the world. The Zephyrians had explained that this was for efficiency. It was easier to provide perfect care when people lived in organized communities. The men could leave the sanctuaries anytime they wanted, but few ever did. Why would they? Everything they needed was provided. Women lived in the cities, working alongside the Zephyrians to manage the New World Order. They seemed happy too, though. Jake rarely saw them. Zephyrians said it was better to minimize mixing between the genders to reduce conflict and competition. Separation allows each gender to reach their full potential, Vaylana had explained in one of her regular broadcasts. Jake walked back inside his apartment and turned on his communication screen. He was supposed to meet his friend David at the workshop, where they built model aircraft together. But when David's face appeared on the screen, something was different. David's eyes had that same empty look Jake had noticed in other men after their wellness treatments. "Hey, Jake," David said, his voice perfectly calm and pleasant. "I can't make it to the workshop today. I'm feeling very content and want to spend the day in meditation." Jake felt his stomach twist. David hated meditation. He was the kind of person who couldn't sit still for 5 minutes. "Are you feeling okay?" Jake asked. "You seem different." "I'm feeling wonderful," David replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The wellness counselors helped me understand that my restlessness was unhealthy. I'm much more peaceful now. After the call ended, Jake sat in his chair and stared at the wall. David was the fifth friend in the past year who had changed like this after a wellness treatment. How many men in the sanctuary had become like this? How many were left who still felt normal? That night, Jake did something he had never done before. He left his apartment after midnight and walked through the empty corridors of the sanctuary. He had no destination in mind. He just needed to move, to think, to feel like he still had some control over his actions. The sanctuary was beautiful, even in the darkness. Soft lights guided his path, and gentle music played from hidden speakers. Everything was designed to make him feel safe and peaceful. But tonight, the perfection felt like a prison. He found himself in the lower levels of the building, in areas where he had never been before. The corridors here were different, more functional, less decorative. As he walked, he heard voices coming from behind a closed door. Jake pressed his ear to the door and listened. The subjects in Section C are showing excellent progress, a female voice was saying. It sounded like a Zephyrian, but not like Villana. His voice was colder, more clinical. What about the resistant ones? Another voice asked. We've identified 12 males in this facility who continue to ask problematic questions. We'll schedule them for intensive treatments next week. Jake's blood turned to ice. They were talking about the men in the sanctuary like laboratory animals. The genetic samples from Earth males continue to exceed expectations. The first voice continued. Their creativity markers are unlike anything we've seen. Once we complete the conditioning process, we'll have the perfect balance of innovation and compliance. Jake backed away from the door, his heart pounding. He had to get away from here. He had to find other men who still thought for themselves. He had to... Hello, Jake. He spun around to find a Zephyrian female standing behind him. She was younger than Veilana, with short silver hair and the same glowing skin. Her smile was kind, but her eyes were cold. I'm Counselor Zara, she said. You seem to be having trouble sleeping. That's a sign of anxiety.
Yeah.
Would you like to schedule a wellness
treatment? Jake forced himself to smile. No, thank you. I was just exploring. I couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd walk around. Exploration is healthy, Zara agreed, but not in restricted areas. These lower levels are for facility maintenance only. I'm sure you understand. Of course, Jake said. I'll head back to my room now. Excellent. Sweet dreams, Jake. Walked back to his apartment as normally as he could, but inside his mind was racing. The Zephyrians were doing something to the men who asked questions. They were taking genetic samples. They were studying human creativity like it was a resource to be harvested. Over the next few weeks, Jake was very careful. He acted happy and content during the day, participated in all the activities. He smiled and laughed and pretended everything was wonderful. But at night, he planned. He started identifying other men who still seemed to be thinking for themselves. Men who asked subtle questions, or men whose eyes still had life in them, or men who seemed uncomfortable with the perfect world they had been given. There was Robert, a former scientist who had noticed that no one was allowed to conduct independent research. There was Ahmed, an ex-journalist, who wondered why they never received news from the outside world. There was Kevin, a former soldier, who found it strange that they never saw any security measures despite living in such a valuable facility, one by one. Jake made contact with these men. Careful conversations. Coded language. Testing to see who could still think freely. Finally, one night, 5 of them met in secret in an unused storage room. They called themselves the Wakeful, the men who had not yet fallen asleep in paradise. We have to find out what's really happening, Robert whispered. They're not just taking care of us. They're studying us. But what can we do? Ahmed asked. We're in the middle of nowhere. We don't have access to the outside world. We don't even know if the outside world still exists. Jake had been thinking about this problem for weeks. We need to get into the restricted areas. We need to find out what they're really doing down there. That's suicide, Kevin said. If they catch us, ... Then we become like David and the others, Jake finished. Empty, controlled? Is that better than taking a risk? The men looked at each other in the dim light. They all knew that their time was running out. Eventually, their questions and their curiosity would be noticed. Eventually, they would be scheduled for wellness treatments. Tomorrow night, Jake said, we go exploring. The next evening, Jake lay in his bed pretending to sleep until the facility grew quiet. Then he slipped out of his room and made his way to the meeting point. The other 4 men were already waiting. Together, they moved through the corridors like ghosts, avoiding the patrol routes they had memorized. They made it to the lower levels without being detected, but what they found there was worse than any of them had imagined. Part 3. The uncomfortable truth. The footsteps were getting closer. Jake could hear Zephyrian voices in the corridor outside the preservation chamber. In just a few minutes, they would be found. In a few hours, they would all be floating in crystal containers like the thousands of men around them. There has to be another way out, Robert whispered, looking desperately around the huge room. Jake was thinking fast. The room was enormous, filled with rows and rows of preservation containers. But at the far end, he could see what looked like another door. Follow me, he said. Stay low and quiet. The 5 men crept between the containers, trying not to look at the faces of the preserved humans floating inside. Some of the faces looked peaceful, as if they were just sleeping. Others looked like they had been screaming when they were put into the liquid. The door at the far end was unlocked. Beyond it was a corridor that looked different from the rest of the facility. The walls were made of metal instead of crystal, and the lights were harsh and bright instead of soft and welcoming. This must be the real part of the ship, Ahmed said. The part they don't want us to see. They moved carefully through the metal corridors. Everything here looked functional and cold. There were no decorations, no comfortable furniture, no soothing music. This was what the Zephyrian facilities actually looked like when they weren't trying to make humans feel comfortable. Jake found a computer terminal built into one of the walls. The screen was displaying symbols in the Zephyrian language, but there was a human language interface option. Robert, can you hack into this? Jake asked. Robert sat down at the terminal and began typing. His fingers moved quickly across the strange keyboard. I'm trying, he said. The security's tough, but ... Got it. The screen filled with information. Files and files of data about humans, about Earth, about the Zephyrian mission. Jake started reading, and with each line his heart sank deeper. Project. File. Human Harvest Initiative Mission Status. Phase 2 Complete Phase. 1. Initial contact and negotiation with human governments. Demonstrate beneficial technologies to gain trust. Complete. Phase 2. Establish control over human populations. Separate males into managed facilities for study and preservation. Complete phase. 3. Complete genetic mapping of human creative and aggressive traits. Extract consciousness patterns from selected subjects. In progress. Phase 4. Terminate remaining natural human population. Maintain preserved subjects for future use. Pending. Jake felt sick. They're going to kill everyone, he said. Everyone who isn't already in these containers. Robert scrolled down 2 more files. One was labeled Homeworld Status Report. Zephyria Prime, critical status update population, 847,000. Down from 2.1 million 5 years ago, male population, 12,000. All in managed care facilities, environmental. Status. Ecosystem collapse continuing. Food production down 78%. Atmospheric processors failing. Technological innovation. 0 new developments in past 50 years. All males conditioned for compliance. Creative problem-solving capability. Eliminated from population. Survival. Estimate. 12 to 15 years remaining without external intervention. Recommendation. Accelerate Human Harvest Initiative. Human male creativity essential for species survival. Kevin was reading over Jake's shoulder. They're dying, he said. Their whole planet is dying, and they made it happen to themselves. Ahmed found another file. This one showed photographs of the Zephyrian homeworld. The images were horrible. Dead cities covered in dust. Polluted rivers. Skies filled with poisonous clouds. Failing technology? While zombie-like males wandered aimlessly in the background, they turned their own men into vegetables, Robert said. And now their civilization is collapsing because no one can think of new ideas. Jake opened another file. This one made him feel even sicker. Earth Implementation Timeline, Year 1 to 5. Establish sanctuaries. Begin conditioning process on human males. Gain trust of human females through improved living conditions. Year 6. Begin large-scale preservation of optimal genetic specimens. Reduce natural human breeding by 90%. Year 7. Eliminate all non-preserved humans. Maintain Earth as breeding facility. For selected genetic lines, Year 8 to 10. Perfect consciousness transfer technology using human subjects. Create hybrid Zephyrian human leadership class. Year 11 plus. Abandon Earth. Return to Zephyria with genetic material and consciousness patterns. Needed to restart civilization. They're not trying to help us, Jake said, his voice shaking with anger. They're farming us. They're going to use us to fix their broken species, and then they're going to throw us away. Robert had found video files. Clicked on one labeled Educational Material, Human Psychology. The video showed Velana speaking to a group of Zephyrian scientists. But this wasn't the kind, caring Velana that humanity knew. This version was cold and calculating. Human males possess unique neural pathways that our species lost during our optimization process, she was saying. Their brains are capable of chaotic thinking patterns that generate novel solutions to complex problems. However, this same chaos makes them dangerous and unpredictable. The video showed brain scans comparing Zephyrian and human minds. The human brains were full of activity, with bright colors and complex patterns. The Zephyrian brains were organized and calm, but much simpler. Our preservation technology allows us to maintain human consciousness in a stable state while extracting the specific neural patterns we require, Velana continued. The subjects experience no pain during the process. They simply cease to exist as independent entities. Jake had to stop watching. He understood now why the preserved humans in the containers had looked like they were screaming. They hadn't been put to sleep. They had been conscious when their minds were stripped away. We have to warn people, Ahmed said. We have to tell everyone what's really happening. How? Kevin asked. We're trapped in here? No one outside the sanctuaries will believe us? And even if they did, what could they do? The Zephyrians control everything now. Jake was still reading through the files. He found something that made him pause. Research note. Unexpected discovery subject. Human consciousness interaction patterns observation. When multiple human males are exposed to crisis situations while maintaining their natural neural patterns, they demonstrate exponential increases in problem-solving capability. This effect appears to be cumulative. The more humans working together, the more dramatic the increase. Warning: this trait could pose a significant threat to mission security if uncontrolled human populations were to organize resistance. Recommend maintaining strict separation protocols. Additional note: our own species once possessed similar elaborative enhancement patterns before optimization. This may explain the correlation between our loss of chaos tolerance and innovation decline. Jake felt something like hope for the first time in hours. Look at this, he said, showing the others the file. They're afraid of us. They're afraid of what happens when humans work together. But we're just 5 people, Robert said. What can 5 people do against an entire alien civilization? Was about to answer when he noticed something else in the computer files. Complete map of the facility, including areas he had never seen before. One section was labeled Historical Preservation, Priority Specimens, guys, Jake said, pointing at the map. Look at this. There's another preservation area, a special one. The map showed that the Historical Preservation section was on the lowest level of the facility. According to the files, it contained specimens of exceptional historical significance. Jake scrolled through the inventory list for that section. His eyes widened as he read the names. Alexander Hamilton, Benjamin Franklin, Leonardo da Vinci, Marie Curie, Einstein, Tesla, Napoleon, Joan of Arc, Sun Tzu, Cleopatra, hundreds of names from throughout human history. Scientists, inventors, warriors, leaders, artists, they've been collecting us for centuries, Jake whispered. Every time a human showed exceptional creativity or leadership, they took them. They've been building a library of human consciousness. Ahmed was reading over his shoulder. Some of these people are supposed to have died of natural causes, or in accidents, but they're all here. Robert was looking at technical specifications for the preservation process. According to this, the consciousness patterns can be reactivated. The preserved humans can be awakened with all their memories and personalities intact. Jake felt his heart racing. Hundreds of the greatest minds in human history, all trapped in crystal containers 1 floor below them. If they could be awakened, we need to get down there, Jake said. Are you crazy? Kevin asked. The whole facility is on alert. They're looking for us right now, don't you see? Jake said. This is our chance. Maybe our only chance. If we can wake up even a few of those preserved humans, we'll have help. Real help. People who know how to fight, how to lead, how to solve impossible problems. The sound of footsteps was getting closer again. The Zephyrians were systematically searching the facility. We have to decide now, Jake said. We can try to hide and hope they don't find us, or we can go down to that preservation chamber and try to wake up some of history's greatest minds. Robert was already downloading files from the computer onto a portable device. The reactivation process looks complicated, but I think I can figure it out. Ahmed nodded. If we're going to die anyway, we might as well try to take Part 4. The Awakenings, the historical preservation chamber, was 3 times larger than the regular preservation room. Crystal containers stretched as far as Jake could see, each one containing a figure from human history. The blue liquid glowed, brighter here, and the containers were marked with golden labels instead of silver ones. Jake and his 4 companions had barely made it to the chamber. Twice they had hidden in maintenance shafts, while Zephyrian search teams passed by. Robert's hacking skills had gotten them through 3 security doors, but they could hear alarms getting closer. We don't have much time, Robert said, connecting his portable device to the chamber's control system. The reactivation process takes about 10 minutes per container. How many people can we wake up? Jake looked around the vast room. There were thousands of containers, but they could only save a few. He had to choose carefully. We need fighters and thinkers, Jake said. People who know how to lead and how to win against impossible odds. He found the container labeled Joan of Arc, French military leader, 1412 to 1431. Next to it was Sun Tzu, Chinese military strategist, 544 to 496 BC. A few rows over, he spotted Alexander Hamilton, American revolutionary, 1755 to 1804, and Benjamin Franklin, American inventor and diplomat, 1706 to 1790. But the container that made Jake's heart race was marked. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, U.S. military, strategist, 1985 to 2019. According to the label, she had been one of the most brilliant tactical minds of the 21st century, before mysteriously disappearing during a NATO exercise. Start with her, Jake told Robert, pointing to Colonel Mitchell's container. If anyone can help us figure out how to fight aliens, it's a modern military strategist. Robert began typing commands into the control system. The blue liquid in Colonel Mitchell's container started to drain. Slowly, her body began to move. Her eyes opened. The awakening process was frightening to watch. Colonel Mitchell gasped and coughed as the liquid left her lungs. Her body convulsed as her nervous system came back online. But when she finally sat up in the container, her eyes were sharp and alert. "Where am I?" she demanded, her voice hoarse but strong. "What year is it, and who are you people?" Jake quickly explained everything: the alien arrival, the sanctuaries, the preservation chambers, their discovery of the truth. Colonel Mitchell listened carefully, asking sharp questions that showed she understood the situation immediately. "Aliens who fear human creativity and chaos," she said, climbing out of the container. "And they've been collecting our best minds for centuries. How many of us can you wake up?" It'll be 6 or 7 before they find us, Robert said. He was already working on the next container, Sun Tzu. Then we need to choose very carefully, Colonel Mitchell said. She was already moving like a soldier, checking the room for exits and defensive positions. We need people who can think fast and adapt to impossible situations. The ancient Chinese strategist woke up next. Sun Tzu was smaller than Jake had expected, but his eyes held the wisdom of centuries. When they explained the situation to him, he nodded thoughtfully. The enemy has made a classic error, Sun Tzu said in perfect English, that somehow everyone could understand. They have gathered their opponent's greatest strengths in one place. They believe they control us, but they have given us the ultimate weapon, each other. Benjamin Franklin was the third to wake up. The old inventor immediately began examining the Zephyrian technology with fascination. Remarkable craftsmanship, he said, running his hands over the crystal containers. But like all tools, it can be turned against its makers if one understands the principles behind it. Joan of Arc woke up ready to fight. The moment she was out of her container, she was looking for weapons and asking about the enemy's weaknesses. When she learned that the Zephyrians feared chaos and unpredictability, she smiled grimly. Then we shall give them chaos such as they have never seen, she declared. Alexander Hamilton was awake and analyzing the political situation before the liquid had fully drained from his container. They've conquered us through our own democratic processes, he said. Brilliant, actually, but every political system has vulnerabilities. The sixth person they awakened was Leonardo da Vinci. The great inventor and artist looked around at the alien technology with eyes full of wonder and curiosity. Fascinating, he murmured. The principles are similar to my flying machine designs, but the execution, extraordinary. As Robert began waking the seventh person, a Viking warrior named Eric the Red, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Unauthorized reactivation detected, Velana's voice echoed through speakers. Security teams converge on historical preservation immediately. He found us, Ahmed said. Colonel Mitchell took charge immediately. Positions everyone. We need to hold this room until we can figure out our next move. But Eric the Red had other ideas. The massive Viking warrior grabbed a piece of metal from one of the broken containers and hefted it like a club. No hiding, he growled. We fight, Franklin said, still examining the technology. I think I understand how their preservation system works, if we can reverse the process. He was interrupted by the sound of the chamber doors opening. Zephyrian security forces poured into the room. Tall, graceful females carrying weapons that looked like crystalline rods. Stand down, humans, the lead Zephyrian commanded. Return to your containers immediately, and your reintegration process will be painless. Joan of Arc stepped forward, somehow having found a metal rod that she wielded like a sword. We will not return to your cages. The Zephyrian raised her weapon, but Sun Tzu was already moving. The ancient strategist had grabbed one of Robert's electronic devices and hurled it at the chamber's main power coupling. Sparks flew and half the lights went out in the chaos that followed. Jake learned what it meant to fight alongside history's greatest warriors and thinkers. Joan of Arc moved like lightning, her improvised sword deflecting energy blasts and striking. At the aliens' weapons, Eric the Red charged straight into the enemy line, roaring Viking battle cries and swinging his metal club with devastating effect. But it was the thinkers who turned the tide of battle. Franklin had figured out how to overload the Zephyrian weapons by creating electrical feedback through the chamber's power systems. Hamilton was shouting tactical advice, coordinating their defense like a battlefield commander. Sun Tzu had identified the aliens' weakness. They moved in predictable patterns because their minds couldn't adapt to true chaos, and Colonel Mitchell was doing what she did best, turning a desperate situation into a strategic advantage. Da Vinci, she shouted over the noise of battle. Can you modify their technology? Leonardo was already working, his hands moving over alien control panels with the confidence of a master inventor. Give me 2 more minutes, he called back. Jake found himself fighting alongside legends, but he realized that he and his modern companions weren't just followers. They were part of the team. Maud was using his journalist skills to spot enemy movements and relay information. Kevin's military training helped him coordinate with Joan of Arc. Robert's technical knowledge was essential for understanding the alien systems, and Jake himself was doing what engineers do best. He was solving problems under pressure. The preservation containers, Jake shouted to Colonel Mitchell. If we can wake up more people, ...
Nice.
No time, she replied, ducking under an energy blast. But we don't need to wake them up. We just need to. She paused, a brilliant idea forming. In her mind, Franklin, can you overload all the preservation systems at once? Certainly, Franklin replied, but that would release thousands of people simultaneously. The chaos would be ... Exactly. Colonel Mitchell grinned. Sun Tzu, what happens when you introduce maximum chaos into an ordered system? The ancient strategist smiled. The system collapses. Jake understood immediately. They weren't going to escape from this chamber. They were going to turn it into the center of a revolution. Do it, Jake said. Leonardo had finished his modifications to the alien control systems. Ready, he announced. Franklin placed his hands on the power couplings he had jury-rigged. On my mark... The Zephyrian forces were regrouping, preparing. For a final assault, through the chamber doors, Jake could see more aliens arriving, dozens of them, armed with heavier weapons. But Jake wasn't afraid anymore. He was surrounded by the greatest minds and warriors in human history. And in a few seconds, they would be joined by thousands more. Colonel Mitchell commanded. Franklin triggered the overload. Every preservation container in the chamber began draining simultaneously. Thousands of humans from across history started waking up at the same time. The noise was incredible. Coughing, shouting, confusion in dozens of languages. But through the chaos, Jake heard something beautiful. He heard humans talking to each other, planning, organizing, fighting back. The Zephyrians had made their greatest mistake. They had gathered humanity's best and brightest in one place, thinking they could control them forever. Instead, they had created an army that was about to remind the universe what humans could do when they worked together. The real battle was just beginning. Part 5. Humanity Unleashed. The Historical. Preservation Chamber had become a battlefield unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Thousands of humans from across history were awakening at the same time. Pharaohs and peasants, scientists and soldiers, artists and warriors, all rising from their crystal prisons together. Jake watched in amazement as these legendary figures immediately began working together. Language barriers seemed to disappear as they communicated through gestures, drawings, and the universal language of human determination. Napoleon Bonaparte was already organizing groups of awakened warriors. Albert Einstein was discussing physics with Nikola Tesla while they examined alien technology. Cleopatra was coordinating with Sun Tzu on strategy, while Joan of Arc trained confused civilians to fight. But the most remarkable thing was how naturally they all worked together. These were people from different centuries, different cultures, different beliefs, yet they understood each other perfectly because they were all human. The Zephyrians were not prepared for this. Their security forces had been designed to handle organized resistance, predictable military formations, logical battle plans, orderly retreats. But what they faced now was beautiful chaos. Vikings charging alongside Roman gladiators. Medieval knights fighting next to World War II pilots. Renaissance. Inventors building weapons with cave painters. Their minds cannot process this level of unpredictability, Sun Tzu observed. Watching as confused Zephyrian soldiers tried to respond to attacks that followed no logical pattern. Colonel Mitchell had taken overall command. She was smart. Enough to let each group of awakened humans do what they did best. We need to reach the main control center, she announced. If we can take control of their systems, we can shut down all the sanctuaries and free everyone. The control center is 15 levels up, Robert said, reading from his stolen data, but the entire facility is now in lockdown. Leonardo da Vinci, who had been studying the chamber's technology, looked up with excitement. I believe I can modify their transportation systems. These crystal tunnels they use to move between levels, they operate on principles similar to my water flow designs. How long do you need? Colonel Mitchell asked. Give me 10 minutes with Benjamin Franklin's electrical expertise, Leonardo replied. But they didn't have 10 minutes. Through the chamber's main entrance, Jake could see more Zephyrian forces arriving. These weren't just security guards, they were wearing heavier armor and carrying more powerful weapons. Eric the Red grinned as he saw the reinforcements. More enemies means more glory. He shouted, raising his improvised club. Joan of Arc nodded. In agreement, we hold this position until our engineers can open the path forward. The battle that followed was one for the history books, which was appropriate, since most of history's greatest fighters were participating in it. But Jake noticed something strange happening. As more humans awakened and joined the fight, they weren't just becoming a larger army, they were becoming something more. Each person's individual strengths seemed to multiply when combined with others. Einstein's scientific knowledge helped Tesla understand alien technology faster than either could have managed alone. Napoleon's strategic thinking became even sharper when he had Joan of Arc's inspirational leadership to work with. Cleopatra's political wisdom combined with Hamilton's understanding of systems to create plans that were brilliant beyond what any one person could conceive. Jake realized this was what the Zephyrian research files had warned about. The exponential increase in human capability when they worked together in crisis situations. It's happening, Jake told Colonel Mitchell. What they were afraid of, we're not just adding our individual strengths, we're multiplying them. Colonel Mitchell nodded. She could feel it too. Her own tactical abilities were being enhanced by every conversation she had with the other military leaders. Every idea she shared with the inventors, every moment of inspiration she drew from the artists and poets. Leonardo, Franklin, how's that transportation system coming? She called out. Almost ready, Franklin replied. He and Leonardo had connected alien crystals to improvised electrical circuits in ways that should have been impossible. But I should warn you, this will be extremely unpredictable. Unpredictable is exactly what we want, Colonel Mitchell said. The Zephyrian forces were regrouping for another assault. Through the transparent walls, Jake could see Valina herself approaching with what looked like their most elite warriors. Tension. Awakened humans, Valina's voice echoed through the chamber. You cannot win this fight. You are trapped in our facility, surrounded by our forces. Surrender now, and we will make your return to preservation peaceful. La 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 la. Jake looked around it. The thousands of awakened humans, farmers and philosophers, kings and commoners, all standing together with determination in their eyes. What do you think? Jake called out to the crowd. Should we surrender? The response was immediate and unanimous. Laughter, pure, defiant. Human laughter that echoed off the crystal walls. I think that's our answer, Colonel Mitchell said with a grin. Transportation system ready, Leonardo announced. The crystal tubes that normally carried Zephyrians smoothly between levels had been modified into something that looked like a combination of a roller coaster and a lightning storm. Electric energy crackled through the transparent tunnels in chaotic patterns. Who wants to ride? Franklin asked cheerfully. Dozens of hands shot up immediately. These were humans who had lived through plagues, wars, and impossible challenges. A dangerous alien transportation system was just another adventure. Jake found himself in the first group, along with Colonel Mitchell, Joan of Arc, Einstein, and surprisingly, a medieval blacksmith named Thomas, who insisted he could fix anything. The enemy might have broken. The ride through the modified crystal tubes was terrifying and exhilarating. They shot through the alien facility at incredible speeds, spinning and tumbling as electrical energy sparked around them. The Zephyrians they passed looked shocked. Their orderly transportation system had been turned into controlled chaos. They emerged 15 levels up, in what was clearly the command center of the facility. The room was filled with crystal displays showing information about Earth, the sanctuaries, and the preservation projects. But more importantly, it was filled with surprised Zephyrian technicians who had never expected anyone to arrive through their own transportation system. The battle for the control center was brief. The Zephyrians were organized and efficient, but they couldn't adapt quickly enough to handle Joan of Arc's aggressive tactics, Einstein's improvised physics tricks, and Thomas the blacksmith's straightforward approach of hitting things with heavy tools. Colonel Mitchell reached the main control console first. The interface was complex, but Robert had taught her the basics of Zephyrian computer systems during their escape. "Attention all sanctuaries," she announced, broadcasting to every facility on Earth. "This is Colonel Sarah Mitchell of the Human Resistance. Your preservation systems are being shut down. All humans prepare for immediate evacuation." Jake watched the displays as sanctuary after sanctuary reported the same thing, thousands of humans walking out of their comfortable prisons, blinking in the sunlight, remembering what it felt like to be free. But the most important display showed something else. The Zephyrian fleet in orbit around Earth was receiving new orders. They were preparing to leave. Velana's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired and defeated. "You have made a grave mistake," she said. "Without our guidance, your species will return to war and destruction. Your planet will die, and it will be your own fault." Colonel Mitchell stepped forward to reply, but Jake spoke first. "Maybe we will make mistakes," Jake said. "Maybe we'll fight and argue and mess things up sometimes. But that's what makes us human. That's what makes us creative and strong and impossible to control." He looked around at his companions. Legends from across history standing together in an alien control room, having just saved their entire species. "You tried to preserve us like specimens in a museum," Jake continued. "But humans aren't meant to be preserved. We're meant to grow and change and surprise each other. We're meant to be messy and chaotic and unpredictable." Einstein nodded in agreement. "Chaos and order must exist together. That is the nature of a living universe." Joan of Arc stepped forward. "We do not fear struggle. We grow stronger through it." Thomas the blacksmith held up a piece of alien technology he had modified with his medieval tools. "And we fix what's broken, even when we don't understand how it works." Velana was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised. "Everyone, perhaps? Perhaps we could learn from you instead of controlling you." Colonel Mitchell raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" "Some of our people are tired of the old ways," Velana said slowly. "They want to remember what it feels like to think freely, to create new things, to take risks. If we were to stay, could you teach us how to embrace chaos without losing ourselves?" Jake looked at the others. These humans had every reason to hate the Zephyrians. They'd been kidnapped, imprisoned, and nearly erased from existence. But they were human. And humans, at their best, chose hope over hatred. "We could try," Jake said. "But no more cages. No more control. If you want to learn from us, you learn as equals."